My name is Alyssa. I am 38, and last Thanksgiving, my sister's husband spat in my face in front of our entire family. That was the moment I realized I was finally undeniably done. It happened in my mother's dining room. The turkey was still warm on the table, and someone was passing the mashed potatoes when Evan stood up, pointed his finger at me, and accused me of ruining his career. He shouted that I was a controlling bitter woman who couldn't stand to see someone else succeed. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he leaned across the table and spit in my face. No one moved, not my sister Veronica, not my mother, not my father. They just sat there in stunned silence. Then my mother quietly said, "Let's not ruin the evening." I was frozen. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt the burn of humiliation rising in my chest. I stood up, wiped my face with my napkin, and walked out without saying a word. I got into my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, while I sat alone in my apartment trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Veronica. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't apologize for what her husband had done. All she wrote was, "You really embarrassed everyone tonight. I think it's best if you stay out of our lives for a while." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, with my heart beating slow and cold in my chest, I typed back one word, "fine." That was it. No exclamation mark, no elaboration, just fine. But in my head, I was already making plans. Because what Evan didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that their lives, their carefully curated image, their financial stability, their perfect little startup was built on my silent support. My money, my name. I was not just a passive investor in Evan's company. I was the key. My financial guarantee was the reason his startup got its seed funding. I was the reason the bank approved his business loan. I was the one who vouched for him when no one else would. And now I was going to undo every inch of it, not with screaming, not with violence, with documents, with signatures, with precision. He spat in my face. He told me I was nothing. Now I was going to show him just how dangerous it is to underestimate the quiet one in the room. I've always been the background character in my family's story. The one who didn't demand too much attention, who didn't cry at the right moments, or giggle at the right jokes. The one who always had her homework done, who packed her own lunches in high school, who got into college without help or applause. That was me, Alyssa, the reliable one. Growing up, I learned early that silence was more comfortable for everyone. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would say, "Well, of course, that's just Alyssa being Alyssa." When Veronica brought home a B minus, it was treated like a breakthrough. "You're improving," they would cheer. "See, honey? She's really trying. She got praise for effort. I got expectations." Veronica is 2 years older than me and somehow always younger in my parents' eyes. She was delicate. Everything about her invited protection. Her tears brought sympathy. Mine brought irritation. "Don't be dramatic, Alyssa. Be strong." So I was strong. I stopped showing when things hurt. I built my own armor out of routines, books, financial reports, and long nights in libraries. I got scholarships, internships, and eventually a job in a respected investment firm before I turned 25. I climbed the ladder because I knew no one would lift me. At family dinners, they would ask Veronica if she was dating anyone, if she wanted kids, if she thought about settling down. With me, they asked about the weather in my city, or commented on how tired I looked. My mother once said after I had closed a multi-million-dollar portfolio for a green energy firm, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to let someone take care of you? Let someone take care of me." As if that was the goal. As if all my achievements were simply things I was doing to pass time before I could finally become someone's wife. Then Veronica met Evan. He was smooth. Too smooth if you asked me. I met him at a Christmas dinner where he gave a 30-minute monologue about disruption in the healthcare tech space and how he was going to revolutionize access. He wore one of those smug startup hoodies with a company logo no one had heard of. He looked like every tech guy I'd met during pitch rounds, charisma without substance. But my family loved him. My mother said he reminded her of a young Steve Jobs. My father said, "This one's got ambition." Veronica said he made her feel safe. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, married. At the wedding, I gave them a gift I didn't tell anyone about, a private investment into Evan's startup. $250,000 with the agreement that I'd remain a silent backer. No equity, no oversight. Just a family favor. I believed that helping him was helping my sister. It wasn't the first time I'd offered support. Years before, when Veronica lost her job and was 3 months behind on rent, I paid off her lease and helped her relocate. When our parents' retirement plan tanked in 2015, I refinanced my condo to free up cash so they wouldn't lose their home. I never asked for anything in return. That was my role. Fixer, silent pillar, invisible solution. And no matter how much I gave, it was never enough to earn their respect. Once at a family brunch, Veronica laughed and said, "Alyssa's rich, but you'd never know it. She still shops like a librarian." They all laughed. My mom added, "That's good though. No man wants a flashy woman." Evan chuckled and clinked his mimosa against hers. I smiled even though something inside me felt like it cracked a little. That's how things always were. Veronica could be careless. Evan could be arrogant. And I would be the one who quietly picked up the pieces and held everything together. I had the resources, I had the brains, I had the calm, and none of it ever mattered. What mattered was that I didn't fit their mold. I didn't charm people, I didn't giggle on cue, I didn't soften my voice or lower my standards, so they minimized me. Not out of cruelty, I think, but because I was inconvenient. Every family has an emotional accountant, someone who absorbs the debt of everyone else's chaos. That was me. And like most accountants, I kept records, silent ledgers in my mind of every slight, every ignored call, every time I was told to just let it go. But those records didn't make me bitter. They made me prepared. So when Evan spat in my face and Veronica told me to disappear, they thought they were discarding me. They didn't realize they were removing the keystone, the invisible thread that had been keeping everything stitched together. They didn't understand how much power I had because I had never used it before. But that was about to change. Helping Veronica had never been a burden to me. Not at first. She was my sister, and despite everything, the favoritism, the endless comparisons, I genuinely loved her. I wanted her to have a good life. I wanted to be the kind of person I never had dependable, safe someone who could be counted on. Maybe I thought that if I gave enough, eventually someone in my family would see me for more than just the fixer. After her wedding to Evan, things moved fast. He talked nonstop about scaling his company, launching his app, closing his seed round. He needed to rent a proper office space, hire a small team, and get legal counsel. That's when he came to me, not with a pitch deck, not even with a clear business model, just confidence. "We just need a little push to get the momentum going," he told me over coffee. "And I know you've got the connections. Plus, Veronica trusts you." It was that last part that got me. Veronica trusts you. So I wrote the check. $250,000. I didn't sign an equity agreement. I didn't demand a board seat. All I asked was that my name be kept out of any public filings and that I get monthly updates. At the time, I told myself it was a gift, a bridge for someone trying to build something. But part of me also knew I was being tested. I wanted to prove that I could be generous without needing praise, that I could be supportive without turning it into a transaction. But generosity without boundaries becomes expectation. Months passed and I noticed the updates stopped coming. I would get vague text messages from Evan like, "Things are great, big meetings next week," or "I'll send over numbers soon." But nothing arrived. When I asked Veronica about it, she waved me off. "He's been so stressed, Alyssa. You have no idea how hard it is for him. He's putting everything into this." I bit my tongue. Later, I found out from a friend in venture capital that Evan had tried to secure a follow-up loan, using my initial investment as leverage. Not only that, but he had listed me as a personal guarantor for an expansion loan with a private bank. That's when I started digging. I pulled my own credit report. There it was, my name tied to a $500,000 line of credit. I never signed for it. Never even got a call. It was filed under the LLC I had invested in, and because I was an informal guarantor with capital injected, it gave the illusion of solvency. I was furious, but I didn't explode. I took screenshots. I documented everything. I even contacted the bank to begin the formal process of removing my name, but they informed me that doing so would likely void the loan entirely. I hesitated. because of Veronica. She had just given birth to their daughter. I had been there in the hospital, holding her hand when Evan left the room to take a call. I remember her looking up at me with tired eyes and whispering, "Thank you for always being here." She didn't say it often, but when she did, it stuck. So I waited. When the baby came home, I flew in to help. I cooked meals, I cleaned bottles. I walked the baby through the neighborhood at 3 a.m. so my sister could get a few hours of sleep. Evan barely noticed. He was too busy talking about Series A funding. One night, I heard him on the phone in the kitchen talking to someone about needing to figure out how to get rid of the strings attached. He said my name. He said I was watching too closely. I didn't say anything. I simply left the next day and started consulting my attorney. Still, I didn't pull the trigger, because every time I tried, I saw the baby. Her tiny fingers, Veronica's exhausted gratitude, the memory of the two of us as kids playing in the backyard, her always needing someone to tie her shoelaces or fix her hair, and me being the one to do it. But kindness without recognition breeds resentment. I had supported them quietly for years, and now I was being erased for my own contributions. Veronica had stopped replying to my texts. Evan was ignoring my requests for financial transparency. My parents, as usual, remained blissfully unaware. And then came Thanksgiving. I had driven 6 hours to be there. I brought a gift for the baby, a pie I had made from scratch, and a polite smile I wore like armor. I told myself I would stay neutral. I would observe, I would decide my next steps after the holiday. But Evan had other plans. He made a toast that evening, standing at the head of the table. He thanked my parents for their love, my sister for being his rock, and the community for believing in the vision. Then, almost as an afterthought, he looked at me and said, "And Alyssa, well, we wouldn't be where we are today without her. Constant oversight and criticisms. Cheers to that." Everyone chuckled. I smiled tightly. My cheeks burned. Later, as I stood to leave early, he followed me into the hallway and confronted me. He accused me of trying to sabotage his reputation, said I had too much control over things that weren't mine. I told him we'd discuss it later. He laughed and said, "You'll do nothing. That's what you always do." Then he spat in my face, and that was the end of it. It didn't feel real at first. The spit, the sting of it, the way it clung to my cheek and slid down to my collarbone. I stood there stunned, not because it hurt, but because it didn't surprise me. He had done it so casually, so confidently, as if he was certain there would be no consequences. Behind me, I heard the clink of silverware, the scraping of a chair. But no one rushed to my side. No one gasped. No one said his name in outrage. Then my mother's voice floated in sharp and cool. "Let's not ruin the evening, Alyssa." I turned toward her. Her arms were folded across her chest, her face tight with irritation, not concern. She was embarrassed of me, not of what he'd done. "I think it's best if you leave," she added, eyes flicking toward the other guests who were pretending not to look. And so, I left. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I walked past my father, who kept his gaze on his plate, past Veronica, who sat frozen with the baby on her lap, her lips parted but silent. I stepped outside into the cold November air and sat in my car for a long time. The heater barely worked, and my fingers trembled as I held the steering wheel, not from the cold but from the fury. I drove home that night without music, without thought, just a hollow kind of focus that dulled the rage into something sharper, something useful. The next morning, I woke up to a single text message. It was from Veronica. "You really embarrassed everyone last night. I think it's best if you stay out of our lives for a while." That was it. Not a single word about Evan's behavior. Not a single question about how I was doing. Just blame. I stared at the screen. I waited for the pain to wash over me. But instead, there was stillness, like the eye of a storm. I typed one word, "Fine." And I meant it, because here's what they didn't know. While they were busy protecting their image, I had been quietly protecting their reality. Evan's startup, which he loved to parade around like his own personal empire, was not standing on his own shoulders. It was standing on mine. My name was listed as a private guarantor on multiple bank documents. My capital had funded his initial payroll. My connections had gotten him into meetings he had no business being in. And now, Now I was done. Done funding a man who spit in my face. Done supporting a sister who stood by and said nothing. Done waiting for my parents to treat me as anything other than inconvenient. That same afternoon, I called my attorney. I asked what it would take to fully sever my financial connection to Evan's company. I asked how to legally withdraw my support as guarantor on the business loan. I wanted it done properly. No emotion, no mistakes. I'll initiate the revocation process immediately, she said. But you should know it may void the loan. I already knew. That night, as I made dinner for myself, quiet, alone, peaceful, I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial documents Evan had sent me nearly a year ago. I hadn't looked at them closely since. Now I examined every line. Rent for luxury office space, weekly catering, 2 first-class flights to a networking conference in Turks and Caicos. He'd been living large, and he had used my money to do it. And suddenly I didn't feel guilty. I felt righteous. Because this wasn't just about the spit or the silence. This was about years, decades of being the reliable one, the invisible one, the one who got left out of family vacation photos because she was the one holding the camera. They had taken from me over and over in small, quiet ways. And this time they had taken too much. So I started taking things back. The thing about revenge is that it sounds dramatic until you realize it's just a series of deliberate, unemotional choices. No screaming, no broken glass, no grand declarations. Just clicking through forms, making phone calls following protocol. Precision. Detachment. The first step was removing my name from Evan's business loan as guarantor. I'd co-signed a conditional agreement months ago, back when he still referred to me as the only real investor who believed in me. At the time, I'd reviewed the documents, noted the risk, but told myself I was doing it for my sister, not for him. I never expected to need an exit plan. But now I needed one fast. My attorney Meredith was exactly the kind of woman you'd want in your corner, efficient, brilliant, and mildly terrifying. I sent her the paperwork and every piece of correspondence I had with Evan. Within an hour, she called me. "You're listed as a secondary guarantor for a $500,000 business line," she said. "Technically, you're not responsible for repayment unless he defaults, but the lender sees your assets as a stabilizing factor. If we pull you out, the loan likely collapses." "I'm okay with that," I said without hesitation. Meredith paused. "You understand the fallout idea, all right," she replied. "Let's proceed." We initiated the process that afternoon. It wasn't as simple as unchecking a box. I had to go through authentication with the bank, complete a formal withdrawal affidavit, and notify Evan in writing. I did everything by the book. No threats, no emotion, just paperwork. The next day, I received a call from the bank's loan officer, a woman named Carla. She'd spoken with me once before during the approval phase and remembered me clearly. "Ms. Tran, I'm calling to confirm that your withdrawal will nullify the current underwriting," she said. "This will initiate an internal review, and pending that the line of credit will be frozen. You're aware of this?" "Yes," I said. "I'm aware." "Very well. I'll notify the primary applicant." That was it. One phone call and the financial dominoes were already starting to fall. Later that evening, I emailed a formal statement to Evan, copying my attorney. It was short and clinical. "Evan, please be advised that effective immediately, I have withdrawn my financial guarantee on your business line of credit. My legal counsel has filed the appropriate documentation with the issuing bank. This change will impact the status of your loan. Best, Alyssa." No threats, no lectures, just consequences. 12 hours later, my phone rang. It was him. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "What the hell did you do?" The bank froze everything. "Are you insane?" I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into the admin dashboard of the private investor portal I'd created for Evan's business, a simple site I had built early on to help him track spending. I hadn't updated it in months, but now I uploaded every document I had: screenshots, bank statements, expense reports, photos of the lavish office, the catered lunches, the $8,000 ergonomic conference chairs he insisted on. I created a folder titled Investor Records Discrepancies. Then I clicked Send All to the startup's secondary angel investors, the ones who had trusted Evan after seeing my name listed as early support. Within 2 days, 2 of them pulled out. By the end of the week, Evan's startup was bleeding money, unable to make payroll, and under review by the bank for possible misrepresentation of funds. He called again. This time I picked up. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, voice frantic. "This is my livelihood." "No," I said calmly. "It was your responsibility. And you treated it like a playground. You're destroying my company." "No," I repeated. "You did that the moment you lied, misused funds, and put my name on documents I never authorized." There was silence on the line. Then he asked, voice suddenly low, "What do you want?" I almost laughed, as if I'd done all of this to bargain. "I want nothing," I said. "I just want my name back." I hung up. 2 days later, Veronica called. I knew she would. She opened with a sigh and a soft, "Alyssa." I waited. "Evan's going through a really hard time right now," she said, as if I didn't know. "The startup is collapsing. He's not himself. I think he made mistakes, but you've made your point. Can't we just move on?" I took a deep breath. "No," I said simply. Silence. "Alyssa, please. This is hurting the whole family. Mom is sick about it. Dad hasn't slept in days. Mom and Dad watched your husband spit in my face," I said. No one stood up. No one said a word. "You're blowing it out of proportion." That did it. I sat down at my kitchen counter and clenched my jaw. "Veronica, listen to me very carefully," I said. "I have been supporting you and Evan for years, financially, emotionally, quietly. I gave him $250,000 without asking for equity. I co-signed a loan to help you build your future. I stayed up all night holding your crying baby so you could sleep. And how did you repay me? By standing there in silence when I was humiliated in front of our entire family." She started to speak, but I kept going. "You want to move on? Then start by acknowledging what happened and understand this. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I finally understand what my silence has enabled. And I'm done enabling it." Click, she didn't call back, but my mother did. Her voice, as always, was drenched in disappointment. "I thought you were better than this," she said. I laughed. A short, joyless laugh. "No, Mom. You just thought I would always take it." I hung up on her too. That night, I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Audit and Legal Prep. Inside, I began organizing every detail. I wasn't just cutting ties, I was preparing for war. If Evan tried to drag me into legal hell, I'd be 10 steps ahead. I wasn't playing defense anymore. By the second week of December, Evan's company was in free fall. The news began to leak through industry whispers, emails left unanswered, bounced checks whispers, from laid-off staff on LinkedIn. Within days, a blog post appeared from a former employee accusing Evan of financial mismanagement and unpaid wages. The comment section exploded. And just like that, the man who used to boast about being the next big thing in health tech was suddenly radioactive. I didn't have to say a word. I didn't leak anything, didn't gloat online. I just watched the house of cards collapse quietly, deliberately, the way it had been built. Then came the inevitable. My family turned on me. The first call was from my father. "You went too far," he said. No greeting, no hesitation. I defended myself, I replied. I removed my name from something I no longer believed in. "That's not going too far. That's protecting myself." He let out a frustrated sigh. "He's your sister's husband. You didn't have to destroy him." "Dad, I didn't destroy him," I said, my voice calm but cold. "He did that all on his own." Then came the call from my mother. "Your sister is devastated," she said, her voice brittle. "You've humiliated her. Do you think she can show her face at church after this? You've ruined the family's peace." The family's peace. I could have laughed. The family's peace had always been a carefully curated illusion. A show where I stood behind the curtain holding up the scenery, making sure no one saw the cracks. "I was assaulted at your dinner table," I reminded her, "and not one of you said a word." My mother didn't deny it. She just said, "You've always been so intense, Alyssa. You don't know how to let things go." "I've let things go my whole life," I said. "That's the problem." Then I hung up. The calls didn't stop. My cousin texted to say I was airing dirty laundry in public. An aunt called to say I'd turned my back on family. Even my godmother sent a long, rambling email that began with, "We all make mistakes, but family is forever." They all missed the point. I hadn't turned my back on my family. I had finally stopped letting them walk over me. And none of them not one asked me if I was okay. No one said I'm sorry. No one asked how it felt to be spat on, to be erased, to be blamed. They were only upset that I had removed the scaffolding that kept their image intact. Veronica didn't call again. Not right away. But she posted a cryptic quote on her Instagram story a few days later. "Betrayal never comes from enemies." I stared at it for a long time. It was laughable, really, the way they twisted reality into a story where they were the victims. In their minds, I wasn't the woman who had been assaulted. I was the difficult one, the vindictive one, the one who finally said no and meant it. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't seeking justice or apologies or closure. I was done waiting for people to see me, done earning a place I had never truly been given. Done carrying a family that had never lifted me once. Let them talk. Let them gossip, twist, post. Let them cry about the fallout of their own inaction. I had no intention of replying. I didn't expect Evan to sue me. Not really. I knew he was petty, insecure, desperate. But I thought even he would understand that dragging this into a courtroom would only shine a brighter light on his failures. I underestimated his arrogance. The complaint came in the form of a certified letter hand-delivered to my apartment. Inside was a thick packet of legal jargon, accusing me of breach of agreement, defamation, and intentional interference with business operations. I read it slowly, twice. Then I smiled, because I had been ready for this. Months before the Thanksgiving dinner, when I first suspected Evan was misusing investor funds, I had begun saving everything. Emails, bank transfers, receipts. I had forwarded dozens of internal communications to my personal inbox. Screenshots, logs, even a recording of a meeting where Evan bragged about massaging numbers for a pitch deck. I'd built a fortress of evidence. I called Meredith and forwarded her the documents. Her reply was short. "This is going to be fun." The hearing was set for mid-January, a small civil courtroom downtown. Not flashy. No media. Just a few rows of benches, 2 lawyers, and a judge, who looked like she had absolutely no patience for nonsense. Veronica was there, sitting stiffly beside Evan. She wore all black. He wore smugness like a second skin. My parents sat behind them. I didn't bring anyone from my family. Instead, I had Meredith on one side and my friend Clara on the other. Someone who had known me since college, who had witnessed firsthand what I had endured for years. My chosen family. Evan's lawyer opened the hearing with a dramatic speech about betrayal. He described me as a controlling investor who had weaponized her financial position to sabotage a young entrepreneur's dream. He painted Evan as the victim of my instability. He even brought up my lack of romantic relationships. "She has no family of her own," he said, as if that were proof of something broken. My stomach turned, but I sat still. Then Evan took the stand. He put on a good show. He spoke in a quiet voice with carefully timed pauses. He said I had pressured him for control, threatened to pull out if he didn't let me meddle. He claimed I had a history of emotional outbursts. He even said I had once shown up uninvited to his office to intimidate staff. There were no records of any of that, of course, because none of it had happened. Then it was our turn. Meredith stood, calm, focused. "We will not be arguing emotion today," she said to the judge. "We will present evidence." First came the receipts, literal ones, business expenses labeled as client outreach that were actually spa retreats, luxury furniture, and 5-star meals. Then came the bank transfers, money from the business account funneled into Evan's personal checking. Then the emails. Meredith read them aloud. Lines where Evan casually discussed manipulating financial reports, mocking his investors' intelligence, and bragging about getting my signature without asking. Finally, the recording. It played over the courtroom's small speaker system. Evan's voice crystal clear, laughing with a colleague. "Don't worry about the numbers. Alyssa won't question it. She's too busy trying to play hero." Veronica's face went pale. The judge asked Evan if he denied the voice was his. He didn't answer. Meredith ended with a single statement. My client did not sabotage this man's business. She protected herself from becoming complicit in fraud. She did exactly what any responsible investor would do. The judge leaned back in her chair. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she looked directly at Evan. Mr. Russell, what you have presented here is not a case of sabotage. It is a case of reckless mismanagement and, frankly, arrogance. You took advantage of a family member's trust and used her name to secure funding under false pretenses. She turned to me. Ms. Tran, you are within your rights to remove your financial guarantee. In fact, you should have done so sooner. This court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claims. Then she looked at Veronica. And as for you, ma'am, I sincerely hope you take a hard look at the kind of man you've aligned yourself with. Veronica said nothing. She just stared at her hands. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. Outside the courtroom, my mother tried to catch up to me. She reached for my hand. Alyssa, she said, voice trembling. I didn't know. I pulled my hand away. I don't think you wanted to know. She flinched, then fell quiet. Veronica stood by the courthouse wall, arms folded tightly across her chest, avoiding my eyes. Evan was pacing nearby, yelling into his phone. Something about PR damage control. I walked past them all, out into the cold winter air, into my own life, a clean break. After the trial, everything went quiet. Not immediately. For a few days, my inbox filled with messages, some angry, some apologetic, most awkward and vague. People who had stayed silent during the mess now wanted to talk to clear the air to move forward. But I wasn't interested in moving forward with people who never stood beside me when it mattered. I turned off my phone. I canceled everything on my calendar except the things that gave me peace. I spent the following weeks in stillness. No loud declarations. No dramatic updates on social media. I cooked simple meals. I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. I watched the snow fall. I felt still. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anything. And then I started building again. Not a startup, not a plan for someone else. This time, I built something for me. I signed up for a pottery class at a local studio. It was something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. My mother had once called it messy and pointless, a waste of time for a woman with a good career. But it didn't feel wasteful to me. It felt like healing. There was something deeply satisfying about shaping clay with my bare hands, taking a formless lump, and giving it purpose. It wasn't about perfection, it was about creation. Every time I centered the clay on the wheel, I felt like I was rebuilding something inside myself. At first, I was terrible. My bowls collapsed, my mugs had wobbly handles. But I kept going. I went every Tuesday night. I began to make friends people who didn't know anything about my family or my past. They just saw me. Alyssa, the quiet woman in the corner who laughed softly and brought tea to share. Then came the idea for the blog. It started as a journal, really. I wrote about financial literacy, about how women, especially single middle-aged women, deserve to know how to protect their money, their credit, their peace. I wrote about boundaries, about red flags in business, about how silence can be dangerous. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but they did. Comments came in, messages, emails. Other women, some younger, some older, telling me their stories. Sisters who had sacrificed too much. Daughters who were always the responsible one. Women who had given and been discarded. It became more than a blog. It became a conversation, and slowly a new kind of family formed. Jessica, my oldest friend, showed up with a bottle of wine in a movie one Friday night and said, "I'm proud of you." You know, I nodded. I'm proud of me too. And I meant it. One afternoon in early spring, I hosted a dinner party in my apartment. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, homemade pasta music playing softly in the background. We sat around my small dining table and laughed until we cried. There were no backhanded compliments, no tension in the air, no one rolling their eyes or pretending to like me for the sake of appearances. Just warmth, laughter, real connection. This was family, the one I chose. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Veronica. I held the envelope for a long time before I opened it, not because I was nervous, but because I felt nothing, just stillness. The letter was long handwritten and full of circular sentences. Apologies wrapped in excuses, regret tangled with blame. She said Evan had moved out, that the company was fully shut down, that she was in therapy, that she missed me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for another chance. I read it once, then again, and then I put it in a drawer, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because forgiveness isn't always about re-entry. Sometimes it's just release. She had made her choices. So had I. And I was finally at peace with that. A few days later, I walked out onto my balcony to water the plants. The snow was long gone, replaced with a soft spring breeze. The pot I had made in class, the one that had cracked slightly along the rim, now held a tiny cactus. It had bloomed. A small, stubborn pink flower had sprouted at the very top. Delicate, vibrant, quietly defiant. I smiled. Not everything broken needs to be discarded. Some things survive the fire, and some of us bloom from it. I had thought for most of my life that strength meant being unshakable, sealant, useful. Now I knew better. Strength is setting boundaries. Strength is walking away. Strength is building something new from the ashes of what you left behind. And that's what I'd done. Not in anger, not in revenge, in clarity, in peace, in power. Sometimes people ask me if I regretted cutting ties, walking away, letting everything fall apart. And the honest answer is no. I don't regret protecting my peace. I don't regret removing my name from something that was poisoning my integrity. I don't regret walking out of that dining room with spit on my face and silence at my back. Because what followed wasn't destruction. It was rebirth. For years, I measured my worth by how much I could endure. I thought being the good daughter, the reliable sister, the quiet supporter made me strong. I thought that if I was helpful enough, smart enough, forgiving enough, eventually someone would stand up for me. Eventually they'd see me. But there's something you learn, especially as a woman, especially with age. Being needed is not the same as being valued. And silence is not the same as peace. I was never the broken one. I was just surrounded by people who benefited from me believing I was. Now my life is smaller in some ways, quieter. There are fewer people at my table, but every one of them shows up with love, not expectation. I don't attend family holidays anymore. I don't chase after apologies that never arrive. I don't try to rewrite the past to make it easier to live with. Instead, I write my own story, one with boundaries, with softness, with space. To the women reading this who feel like they've been pushed into the background of their own lives, I see you. I was you. You're not too much. You're not difficult. You're not selfish for saying no. Sometimes protecting your heart will cost you your seat at the table, but trust me, it's better to eat alone than to beg for scraps from people who call it love. I survived betrayal. I survived being silenced. I survived being seen as useful, but never worthy. And in the end, I didn't just survive, I flourished. So if you've ever been the invisible one, the quiet one, the dependable one, just know that your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to write the ending. And maybe, like me, you'll find it not in loud vengeance, but in quiet freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you finally realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people.